Everyone, welcome to France 24 24-hour news broadcasting from Paris, France. Here's a look at today's headlines. Here in Paris, the Olympic flame is extinguished for, quote, technical reasons. This is hundreds of pro-Tibet protesters blocked the torch on its trip around the French capital. 3,000 policemen are standing by to protect the flame. But first, the Olympic flame has been extinguished for, quote, technical reasons, this according to the Paris police. The torch began its troubled trip around the French capital an hour and a half ago. Since then, the flame has been taken off the streets of Paris and onto a bus to ensure its security on this latest leg of its round-the-world tour. Hundreds of pro-Tibet activists have turned out in Paris to protest against China's crackdown in Tibet, and those protests are turning violent. Political Affairs editor David Crossan is with us now. Dave, there were already major protests following the flame in London. Tell us a bit more about what's happening here today. There were 3,000 policemen out there. Wasn't this supposed to not happen this way?
It was supposed to be a security bubble fit for a visiting head of state. And yet, no sooner had the Olympic torch relay begun its journey in Paris than it hit problems. Even before that, there were protesters gathering opposite the Eiffel Tower where it started its journey. One locally elected Green official was arrested as she tried to approach the flame carrying a fire extinguisher. Another tried to snatch it out of the lead relay runner Stéphane Diagana, the former world 400 meters hurdles champion's hands. He was also spoken to by the security forces. The Olympic flame extinguished for technical reasons, as we're hearing. Well, if it was an Olympic event with all this getting on and off the bus, they'd be disqualified. It has happened that someone tried to shortcut the marathon by taking a taxi. This torch having real problems on its trip around Paris, a very, very slow journey. At the moment, still only about 15% of its journey completed. It was meant to finish it by 5 o'clock. After starting at 12:30, but the protesters are lining the route. They're lying in front, blocking the torch relay's passage. We've seen a flag, you can see it on the pictures there, with the 5 Olympic rings in the form of handcuffs. That was hoisted on the Eiffel Tower by protesters, and firemen were sent up to take it down. So really it hasn't been at all a smooth journey for this. The protesters are very, very organised, and at the moment they're fulfilling their objectives, which is getting an awful lot of media attention and stopping the flame.
Now, it's true we can't see these images that are incredibly violent, these disruptions happening now between the police and the protesters. David Carlson, does this reflect in any way Paris' the situation in Tibet? I believe that there's a banner that's been unfurled on the Paris' town hall.
There has. Bertrand Delanoë recently overwhelmingly re-elected as Paris mayor, and on the Paris City Hall today there is a message saying that human rights should be respected all over the world, in a clear allusion to the situation in Tibet. And the flame was due to stop in front of City Hall later on its journey for quite a number of minutes. A lot of the athletes involved in today, it's not just athletes who are carrying the torch around Paris, but a lot of them have at least a broad amount of sympathy for the protesters' cause, and indeed they designed a badge. For a Better World is the badge that they're wearing, and they might wear something similar at the opening ceremony in early August.
All right, now you're seeing here again these live images from the Eiffel Tower. Earlier we did see protesters who were located, we've just lost our feed, we'll come back now to you, David Crossan. We did see some images earlier of the flame being located not far from the France 24 headquarters. It was supposed to make a 28-kilometer journey that now has turned into just barely under a kilometer in an hour and a half. It's much longer than it was said to be.
It certainly is. Now, they do reserve the right to change the route if necessary. Well, if they're going to finish it today, at this current rate it will be necessary, but what can they do? 3,000 policemen on the route, riot police, firemen, police on roller skates. They really couldn't have taken many more precautions, and if that's not working, this security bubble, as I mentioned earlier, fit for a head of state, but against the organised protesters here, both French people, Chinese expatriates, Tibetans, lining this route. It's very, very difficult to see how the French security forces can react to it. They know that any heavy-handed displays will reflect very, very badly on them. But how can you protest against a human rights situation in China if images are showing you dragging young protesters off the streets?
Right, with bloodied mouths, as we can see here on this particular image right now. Thank you very much, David Crossan, Political Affairs Editor here at France 24. Now, as David mentioned, 3,000 security personnel are in Paris. They had braced themselves for these protests. We'll now take a look at how that security went about preparing itself.
It's been a hazardous journey so far for the Olympic flame, so authorities in Paris have taken no chances on security.
Free our neighbours! Free
It was put to the test before the relay even began. This pro-Tibetan demonstrator grabbed by officers as she tried to gain access to a secured area. Some 3,000 police officers have been deployed for the torch's appearance in the French capital. Several dozen are flanking torchbearers to shield them from protesters along the 28-kilometre route. Everything is being monitored here in the security control room, police using an elaborate video surveillance network to monitor any disruptions. The NGO Reporters Without Borders has accused French authorities of caving into Beijing's demands for high security. Whether it's warranted or not, this is a barrier which many demonstrators are determined to breach.